Next up, we have I don't know, somewhat low-budget movie, which I first heard about from other horror fans. I think it's primarily aimed towards other horror fans. I can't imagine a mainstream audience getting into this one. Titled Gutterballs from 2008, which is sort of a rape revenge movie. This woman gets somewhat brutally raped by a gang of 4 guys. Then the following night, during like a after-hours bowling tournament, in which case the gang of guys, along with the victim and her group of bowlers, were all there, and they get killed off throughout the night, in decently violent ways. And who is the kid? Well, we pretty much suspect who the killer is, but it's sort of not necessarily a retro slasher, but it has, some of the music choices is quite a bit 80s. I think there's some Loverboy in there and some other 80s Canadian bands. And it's definitely a lower budget movie, and it does suffer from quite a bit unlikable characters and some pretty childish dialogue, which its dialogue's not necessarily unrealistic with some of these characters, but after seeing it for like 40 minutes, it gets a bit old maybe. So there's definitely problems here, but I personally think the benefits outweigh the negatives. But before I touch too much on that, what have you seen this one before? What's your history with this?
No, this was the first time watch. I definitely seen a numerous amount of people, throughout websites and Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff mention it, and usually when I see someone mention it, it's usually in a positive light, they enjoyed it on some level. But it's definitely an acquired taste. It's not something you can just throw out there, with 10 different people and expect the majority of them to like it. It has to be a certain type of, I think, horror fan that you need to kind of aim this towards. The thing is, I didn't know really anything about the movie other than some horror fans that I've seen talk about it. They seem to like it, so I just assumed, I don't know, what is it, a low-budget gory slasher? And it is that, but in addition to that, I was not expecting all the gratuitous sexual activity in the movie, let's say. The rape scene in this movie, even though rape is despicable in any form in any movie, I found it even more despicable in this movie, even compared to something like I Spit on Your Grave. Mainly because I feel it was more graphic. Obviously it didn't last as long as it does in I Spit on Your Grave, because that's just like we said in our review, it's like just constant rape for like 30-40 minutes or whatever it is. With this one, it's more like, I don't know, 5 minutes.
But it's a difficult scene to get through.
Yeah, but like I said, they're more graphic with it. They don't just have sex with her, they shove bowling pin up her cooch. And you see blood and everything associated with that, and it just feels, in terms of just watching that, it just feels worse than the things you see in I Spit on Your Grave.
That was probably somewhat intentional, just because it's so much easier to feel like you really want to see those guys get killed after that.
Yeah, but the thing is, because they're all so annoying, I wanted to see them killed anyways. They didn't even need a rape scene for me to feel that way about them.
You did it like that one guy's hyena like love?
No. And the funny thing is, I put this on while my wife was sitting next to me, and she really doesn't like I Spit on Your Grave for the reasons, for the obvious reasons. So when this is on, I was kind of like I kind of wasn't surprised that type of thing was in it, but I just didn't think it would be as graphic or as gritty as it was. But yeah, so after the first guy, has his turn on, and because he's the main guy, I'm thinking, okay, well, he's done. This rape scene's done. Suddenly a killer's gonna pop out or something like that. That's kind of what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting all 4 of them to have a go. The good thing is she was kind of just messing around on her phone. She wasn't even really paying attention, so.
You may have just saved your marriage.
So, like I said, after all that, these characters were just so annoying for the most part. we've got one guy who he's just constantly laughing. He made me think of a male version of, I don't know if you're familiar with this person, Chanel West Coast. She's on this MTV show called Ridiculousness, and she has a laugh that's kind of like a dolphin. And this guy kind of sounded like a male version of that. He just does not stop laughing, at least in the beginning of the movie. Later on, he kind of does tone it down, but even just before he dies, he brings it back. Yeah. It was good to see him eventually bite the dust. The main, I guess, bad guy, if you want to call him that, the Steve guy, jeez, talk about what a dick. This guy's just constantly talking down to everyone. Like, he treats all the women like shit. He constantly says faggot and all those type of words. It's just, like you said, there's definitely people out there who could be somewhat similar to this. It's just too much. Like, it's too much.
It's somewhat interesting though, and you may have heard this too, but apparently quite a bit of the this dialogue was actually improvised by the actors. So that might be part of the reason why it might be a bit...
It's a light script, so they have to pad it out with a few extra faggots, yeah. But I will say, I mean, this does kind of... I don't think I'd call it porn, but it definitely borders along that fine line, because we do see quite a graphic 69ing scene. I don't know, maybe this movie is cut in certain versions, but I have a feeling that whatever I watched was definitely not a cut version, because you definitely see a lot of genitalia action, let's call it that. So it was very graphic. You see just as much, at least in that brief moment, as you would see in an actual porno. But I must say that was a very interesting death. I've never seen someone killed from a 69 before.
Yeah, I sort of wonder how many times. I'm assuming it's been done somewhere else. I just don't know where.
Well, maybe in a porno.
Okay.
So, moving on as well, when they're putting in all their names to start this bowling competition, it just and we see them put in their names, and eventually that BBK comes up as well. All I can keep thinking about is this moment in The Simpsons, which it's something a lot of people would have done as children, which is when you're putting in your names, usually it lets you put in 3 characters, so typically people will put in poo and ass. So as they're putting in their names, I'm thinking, how come no one chose poo or ass?
As someone who's bowled once in his life, I cannot say.
I have bowled many times. My mum is actually an extremely good bowler, so yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of bowling. Feel free to jump in if I'm talking too much about this, but like I was saying, pretty much all of these characters, at least 90-something% of the characters, are really annoying, really unlikable. I guess if I have to choose a character to like, maybe the bowling alley worker guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's one of the only. He's not even a great character, but he's decent. He at least tries to be okay.
Yeah.
I do sort of like the way he talks to the kids.
Yeah. I mean, even he got a little bit too silly for my taste. I think it was more that the characters were just constantly doing the same things. It's even the way he talked, it just wore thin a bit. And obviously I enjoyed him bickering and giving shit to some of these other idiots, but it just felt like he was constantly taking shit and eventually backing down. Like that scene where the bowling ball got damaged or whatever. They bring it to him, they're like, fucking replace it. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to replace it. And he's like, fucking replace it. No, I'm not going to replace it. He's like, fucking replace it. And he's like, well, if you're lucky, I might replace it.
Well, I think part of that, and this is just how I see it, that bunch of 4 guys, they obviously came from very wealthy families. Like this stereotypical Jackson who grew up in pretty big and influential families. And I wouldn't be surprised if he felt like he probably didn't have much of a choice. I mean, he might try to act like a big tough guy, but I mean, saying no to somebody who might have influence over your potential job is always difficult.
I would say that, I mean, this one obviously has somewhat of a cult following, and I know there was a sequel made. I did hear about the sequel even before I watched this movie, but I looked it up on IMDb, and it's only got like 100 ratings. Which
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with that. I also heard about it. I like the poster. I sort of wonder if there's some type of distribution issue or something, because it's obviously out this. At least some people have seen it, but I'm not sure how easily available it is.
Well, I'm not sure exactly why, but as I was looking through IMDb, I did notice that the guy that made this movie and also the second movie, he actually died late last year. So I don't know what he died of, but it said he died in October 2019, so that probably has something to do with it if it's still one of those movies that hasn't actually seen a proper release yet. I don't know if it has. I haven't actually searched for it, but I assume that's got something to do with it. I mean, I'd probably check out the sequel just, to see where they go with it, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great movie by any means for me.
Yeah, I think one of this, what I think one of the things that people talk most about. Yeah, it looked like he died of cancer. I'm just reading about it on I think Bloody Disgusting. But one of the things that stands out about this movie is probably going to be this puzzle effects and the quite a bit, like you said, there's a bit more nudity here than what you would expect from a quote unquote normal, even rape revenge film, to be honest. I mean, some of this stuff is pretty graphic. I mean, that scene where I'm not sure what the proper term would be. I guess transvestite was getting his penis cut in half. I'm assuming you saw that.
Yeah.
That was a painful scene. Like I know it looks somewhat fake, but even so, that was a painful scene. And that was probably one of the ones that stood out the most, aside from maybe the bowling pin scene during the rape at the beginning. But even like the bowling ball polishing scene with the guy getting his heart pushed in, that was pretty decent effects. And I mean, there's even a few good shotguns to shot blast to the heart toward the end. So I think it has I don't think it's necessarily amazing, but I do think the gore they have in this movie is probably one of the reasons it has more of a cult following than it would have had without that. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for the gore, I doubt that many people would be talking even somewhat positively about this.
Yeah, it's definitely got some decent gore in it. If someone recommended this movie, for someone saying, hey, recommend me a gory movie, I could agree with that recommendation. But it's just a shame that to see all that gore, you have to endure some pretty terrible characters.
Yeah, and actually, on a side note, no, obviously, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the ending, I'm not very satisfied with how it concluded, because I guess it was a lot more busy than what you would expect. I expected it to be some type of tryst. And I should say, I've seen this once before, much like Naked Fair. I saw this like a long time back, maybe 2 years after it came out. So this wasn't entirely new material for me, but I did forget who the killer was. So I was expecting some type of tryst, but the amount of I guess not tryst, but it's a lot more busy than you would sort of expect, and I thought it was personally a bit too busy to really enjoy.
Yeah, it's a messy movie in more ways than one.
Plus, that final scene was pretty horrible too. But I still think, despite the pretty despicable characters, and Steve being the worst of them, but I mean that AJ guy, the guy with the laugh, was pretty horrible too. I still think for a low budget rape revenge movie with sometimes a retro feel to it, I think it's okay. And in fact, I generally, it's close, but I do think this is. I think it's a bit above average, if only because of the budget they had to go with. I mean, the story definitely could have used to work. The conclusion definitely could have been a bit better, but I still think it's a not necessarily enjoyable, but I think it's a okay made movie. So I'm probably going to throw this one a 7.5, and I'll round it down to a 7. And just to be clear, it just barely hit 7.5. So close. But I think it's decently average movie. I think it does better than it could reasonably have been expected to do. And even though it, like you said, it would really only appeal to a very small niche group of horror fans. Especially, that's pretty much true for any rape revenge horror movie. If you're into rape revenge horror movies and you haven't seen this one yet, I would certainly recommend it.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna give it a 5, and it's got good things and bad things, and unfortunately all the bad things just overshadow some of the good things. Like the gore in the movie is definitely really good. Like, it's a really messy movie when you see some of these kills, but also, like I've been saying, these characters, I mean, my god, some of them, like the laughing guy, and then Steve, like, forget Adam Sandler, Jack Nicholson should be giving anger management to this guy. I mean, he needs some goose forever. Yeah, this guy's just, like, non-stop, just yelling at everyone and calling everyone faggots all the time, and
yeah, his entire personality was not necessarily that attractive.
Yeah. Anytime he's on the screen, which was quite a lot, at least for the first half of the movie, he's just constantly like, suck my dick, faggot, get me a beer, bitch, fuck you, bitch, slut, faggot, God. You know, I don't think he ever had one line which didn't include some sort of derogatory comment, so... Anyways, in addition to that, this movie does have one of the shortest miniskirts I've ever seen, so...
Although, I mean, before the whole rape scene, I mean, who could say no to that type of miniskirt, though?
Yeah. You could see the beaver. If someone had taken poo or ass on that screen, maybe, just maybe, I would have given it a slightly higher score.
Well, if you're lucky, maybe the second movie does that.